a playlist original.
At a school like Reagan High, popularity can be deadly.
I heard she choked on a Jawbreaker.
That is so cool.
I don't think we've met, what with the cruel politics of high school and all.
From TriStar Pictures comes the battle of the babes.
It's hard. It's over, Courtney.
I am petrified.
Jawbreaker.
Our best friend is dead.
Do you have any idea what that means?
You were shooing for prom queen?
Rated R. In theaters February 19th.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Back to the Blockbuster Presents Deep Dives, where we talk about some of your favorite films or some movies that you may have forgotten about. Typically on the Deep Dive spinoff, we've been asking our special guests to choose the films that they want to deep dive into, but occasionally we just come to a mutual understanding on what the movie is we're going to be discussing. One time, our friend JC, Merc with the Movies, was on, and while he did not pick American History X, we both mutually agreed that we would talk about that film because it was right around the time of its 25th anniversary. And I'm in a similar situation with another movie, completely different than American History X, which actually just celebrated its 25th anniversary yesterday as a recording. We were recording February 20th on a Tuesday. And this person, we've been trying to get on a deep dive for a bit and was going to have him pick his own movie to deep dive into, but when I put up the prompt for who wants to talk about this particular movie as a deep dive and in honor of its 25th anniversary, he jumped at the chance. So I would like to introduce Mario Mello to the show, who I actually know on Instagram as Movies with Mario. So thank you for coming on and talking about 1999's Jawbreaker with me.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you for the introduction. Like you said, I'm Mario. My Instagram is at Movies with Mr. Mario, where I do movie reviews, TV reviews of things I'm watching, and share the latest pop culture news. Yes, I was very excited for this movie. Actually, this is one of my favorite black comedies. So I usually always have it on a cycle at least once or twice a year. So knowing it's the 25th anniversary, and oh, hey, I'm down for it. So it's a very cool movie to talk about. So I'm excited to do that with you.
Yeah, I mean, this was it was a movie I actually watched a bit when it first came out, and maybe a few years after that, but I hadn't watched it in a few longer than 10 years. I think it's been a while since I saw it until actually yesterday when I watched it for this, and a lot of fun memories came back. I think it still holds up really, really well. I was excited to see that, and we'll talk about this a bit, that the movie did not do all that great when it came out in 1999. It was considered a financial and critical failure, but like a lot of these kind of movies, it went on to gain a pretty substantial cult following, and it actually I guess has a pretty big following on TikTok with a lot of memes. A lot of people still trying to imitate the fashion from the movie. A lot of quotes that are being shared online from the movie. A lot of I would say Varsity Blues celebrated its 25th anniversary recently in January, and that movie was more financially successful. But just from my viewing of social media and X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, I saw more posts about this particular film for its 25th anniversary, and more so than Varsity Blues, which was very interesting, I thought.
Yeah, 25 years. I think definitely because it is a dark comedy. It's not for everyone. I remember there's another dark comedy. I can't remember when it came out, but remember Death to Smoochie? That was with Robin Williams. That was another one that was everyone did not like it. It was a box office failure, and then I feel like it's delved into kind of a cult following as well. But it's just those dark comedies. I think at that time people just weren't clicking with them. Yeah. And I think I'm glad it does have a following now, because they're one of the original, the Mean Girls. We had Heathers in the 80s. Now we had this one in the 90s, and then you have Mean Girls 5 years later in the 2000s. So there is precedence there, but I think this does. Mean Girls, I know, did take some of their stuff, not in a bad way, but homages to Heathers and Jawbreaker. So it is it's an important film. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I think so too. Now I was you know, I the reason I had it on our list of movie anniversaries to do in the main show, and I was messaging some other people because I know like my co-host Jackson, he's down to do like most movies, even if he hasn't seen them, and I'm sure he would have been down to like talk this one up. But we actually had a bunch of other February anniversaries that we were going to do, and couldn't quite fit this one in. And I was like, okay, well maybe I won't do it. And I messaged someone else who's been on the show a lot, Mark from Release Day Rewind, and I was like, "Are you gonna do Jawbreaker?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm definitely doing it." And then I was like, "Well, I think I should try to find a way to do it." And thankfully, having a spin-off separate show gives you an opportunity to do it. So I was really happy to fit it in because I hadn't watched it in a really long time, and I was hoping it would still hold up for me, and it definitely did. And I like I said, I really love seeing everything people were sharing yesterday, and the director of the movie, Darren Stein, was sharing. I think anyone that posted tagged him in something for the anniversary, he reposted it on his Instagram. And I just saw a bunch of stuff on TikTok and X and Twitter. It really, for a movie that only made $3.1 million during its initial run in theaters, I felt like I saw that being shared and talked about yesterday more so than maybe other kind of popular movies around. Like I saw more from this than even we just had an anniversary recently for She's All That. Not saying that wasn't successful, but I saw more online for Jawbreaker than that movie.
Yeah.
And I guess when the audience is pretty vocal and loud, and even though the movie might feel small, it can kind of overpower and dominate other films that appear to have a bigger following. And I think that was the case with Jawbreaker. Which I didn't really, I guess, pay attention to, and like through all its other milestone anniversaries since it came out. But this one, was one I really noticed it for, which is why I was like, I think this will be a good one to do. Some might question, like, is it worthy of a deep dive? Here's the thing: the deep dive spinoff isn't always about like these kind of thought provoking. Let's pick them apart kind of films. We want to kind of dive into any genre. And we haven't really done a lot of dark black comedies on the deep dive spinoff before, and this seems like a perfect one to do.
Yeah, and they don't make them. They don't make them like this anymore either. Too, I feel like we don't. I don't think it's been a while since we've gotten one, and we always talk about they don't make the movies like they did in the '90s or the '80s and stuff like that. And I feel like this is one of them. Like I don't know. I mean, if they put this movie out today, I don't know how well it would do just because of the content, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know, because it's so quotable and so, I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about. Like, would it make it today if it was released today? Obviously, you would have to have different casts and stuff because.
Right, definitely. Even I kind of wondered that too because it's when I was reading up on it, just preparing for this after watching it again, it seemed it would be interesting to find out if it would be successful today, because I think the reason why it wasn't successful even in 1999 was because they weren't really ready for it. Even though we were in the middle of this like teen movie kind of boom back then, this was very different beasts from what was coming out for most teen films. And it's rated R, it's very dark, it's funny, but it definitely was not like the other ones that were coming out. So and I think the director said it almost felt like the rotten stepsister of the bunch of those movies that was coming out. And it's interesting. It's not like they were afraid of like R-rated teen movies, because Varsity Blues was R-rated, but very different. And then in March we get Cruel Intentions, which is R-rated. But those, despite the fact that they were R-rated, even Cruel Intentions being a bit more darker than something like Varsity Blues, they were still more straightforward in their narratives. And this one is not. It really kind of toes a very fine line a bit. So I think that's why it didn't do all that great initially. And I think it's the kind of film that is perfect to be rediscovered down the line. And I heard that, and then from what I read, that happened almost immediately when it came out on home video. Is that when that's when that started to really happen, and people shared it and discovered it. And I think once people start to once they go back and revisit something like Heathers, which this film was compared to a lot, some critics thought he even like ripped off Heathers. We can talk about that too. And then you have Mean Girls in 2004. I think once you look back on like, oh, Heathers did this, and you're like, oh, well, this movie did something similar. If you look at Mean Girls, like, oh, hey, that did something similar, but what was this other movie that came out like in the middle? That's how it kind of gets, I think, discovered by a new audience, which is great. Yeah, you're right. I think since really Mean Girls, I mean, Bottoms, I guess, is kind of a recent example of like a darker kind of teen comedy, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jawbreaker seems like a very much its own entity, and even something like Mean Girls, which has like a fun, like occasionally mean spirited script, still in the end, plays it pretty straight by the end of the movie because there's like a message and all that by the end of the movie. Jawbreaker doesn't really have so much of a, I guess there is one in there, but it's not like the wholesome one that's presented in Mean Girls.
We feel good afterward.
Right.
And nobody dies in Mean Girls,
No one dies in Mean Girls. And this, unlike, Heather's in this. Yeah. But, this one kind of wears its, and proudly, and I respect it, it wears its meanness on its sleeve completely. And I know, I think that it's one of its best qualities. Before we get into like other deeper things with the movie, just in case people aren't familiar with Jawbreaker, it is written and directed by Darren Stein and stars Rose McGowan, Rebecca Gayheart, and Julie Benz, as well as Judy Greer. I think one of her first major
big ones.
They are star as girls, an exclusive clique in their high school. They pull a prank on one of their friends, a birthday prank, a very bizarre birthday prank, where they kidnap her and gag her with the Jawbreaker, hence the title, and then she chokes on it and dies. And then it's all about how they try to cover up her accidental killing, and then how Judy Greer, Fern's character, comes into play is that she finds out about all this, and to silence her a bit, they say that they will give her a popular girl makeover, make her part of the clique, and that's how the story kind of progresses. But yeah, like we said, the movie came out on February 19th. 1999. We just did an anniversary for October Sky, which also came out the same day. I had no idea those movies came out on the same day at all.
Total opposite spectrum right there.
Total opposite spectrum. But yeah, it was eviscerated by critics at the time that it came out. I think it has a 14% on Rotten Tomatoes. And it received a D+ cinema score from opening day audiences, and even for a budget, it was a pretty cheap film to make. $3.5 million. It only made $3.1 million, but like we said, it has gone on to gain a pretty sizable cult following. So I guess to start off, when did you first see the movie? What did you kind of think of it back then, and what are your kind of Cliff Notes version thoughts of it now?
So actually, it's super funny because I grew up in like a very conservative household, so stuff like this we were not allowed to watch. I was in 7th grade when this came out, so definitely not allowed to watch it.
Oh, there you go.
So actually, I didn't actually watch it till I was in college, so probably about 2005, 2006. Started watching everything I wasn't allowed to watch, back then.
There you go.
And this was one of them, and I just remember falling in love with it and just like, oh my gosh, it's so funny. And it was cool because I was studying film at like junior college here at the same time. So I want to say it was the professor, because she would always give us lists of movies like we should watch as like film students and stuff. And I remember this was on it because she would give us like different genres. So one of the genres was like teen movies, and I remember this was on it, and I believe that's why I checked it out. But again, it's total opposite of what we were used to at that time. She's All That, Varsity Blues, where it's like more comedy, hardcore comedy, and then feel good message at the end, whereas this one is comedy, but then you get kind of a the darker side of high school and motives of certain characters and stuff. So but it's still one that I still, like I said, I watch this probably once or twice a year just because it's on a loop, and it's an enjoyable film for me. I'm a big Judy Greer fan too. Like everything she does, like she always makes the movie better. Even Cursed, the Wes Craven movie that nobody ever likes, but I'm like, Judy Greer's so good in it. Like I need more of that. So and just in here, it's just even more perfect because she just plays the the meek little nerd, and then she gets the transformation into Fern Mayo, or from Fern Mayo to Violet.
So, Violet.
So, and she just plays that, like, the top B all really well. So, and then we got a great cast here too. I mean, Rose McGowan, Rebecca Gayheart, and it's funny because the year before Rebecca Gayheart was in Urban Legend,
Yeah.
which, spoiler alert, she plays very a not nice person in that one. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's funny to see her go from there to here, where she's popular, but she has a nice side to her too.
Right,
So,
right.
and
Yeah,
Rose
that's
McGowan,
true.
we love Rose McGowan too. She was in Scream in 1996, and then here, and so
Yeah.
it, it's a really good cast too. Like, when I look at they invented I can't remember Heather's, but they did the popular girl slow mo walk in the hallways.
Yeah.
That was a very popular thing, and then Mean Girls did it, so I know they did a homage to that, just to
Yeah.
because that was a very popular thing in high school, is the slow mo walk.
The slow-mo walk. Yeah, I was actually looking that up to see, and from what I read, they believe that Mean Girls was, that was an homage to Jawbreaker, and really cool moment in the movie. I mean, I think, and the director said that it was something that was written, because everyone was like, did it happen like on the day, like, or was it written in the script? He said it was written, and I guess he wanted the girls to kind of have, like, the cues, like the guys in those movies to always have like a cool slow mo walk, whether it's an
Hmm.
action movie or whatever it is. And he basically wanted them to have like kind of like their gangster moment, like they get to walk in
Yeah.
line and like
Hmm.
look cool. And that's kind of where that uh, came from. And it is crazy that something from a movie that was so small gets homage in a bigger movie. And
Hmm.
hopefully, I think a lot of us saw the parallels, but hopefully other people saw it too, and it was like, hey, and I think they got this from uh Jawbreaker, little movie that didn't really do much when it came out, but certainly inspired them for even for that one moment
Yeah.
in Mean Girls, which I
Hmm.
think is cool. And yeah, I actually love the cast too. Rebecca Gayheart, I like you bring up, because we talked about her when we covered Urban Legend, and of course in that movie she's good at playing the fake friend in the beginning,
Hmm.
and then of course if you haven't seen it, you know, came out over 25 years ago, so sorry about that, spoiler alert. But she is the killer at the end of the movie, and is good at playing crazy as well. But in this, she gets to be the nice one, the sweet one, and she plays that part really well. Julie Benz, who plays Marcy, uh, was on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I knew her from at the time when it came out. And of course, she would go on to she was on Angel after that, Dexter. Like, she's done a lot of
Hmm.
stuff since this. And Rose McGowan was just she's got the look and the delivery and the attitude. I
Hmm.
don't want to say that she was like typecast. I think because like she didn't play this kind of role on Charm, right? She can play soft, and we've
Yeah.
seen that. But what she's really good at is playing these characters who are very snarky, a little bit on the mean side, but
Hmm.
it just seems like something that comes easy to her, and she pretty much owns the movie. I mean, I like there was some line deliveries I had totally forgotten about from
Yeah.
her, and she is just great at delivering them without missing a beat.
Hmm.
And I think that her character itself, has gone on. Character of Courtney has gone on to probably become iconic in its own right as
Hmm.
one of the if you're thinking about mean girls from like these high school teenage movies, she should be right up there on the Mount Rushmore. I think
Yep.
she's just like
Courtney
she's
Chain.
yeah, Courtney Chin, pretty solid. I don't know, she dominates the film, and she was like, I mean, she kind of has that kind of snarkiness in Scream. You see it. If you've ever seen the Doom Generation, which was like I think her film debut, she
Hmm.
has she's got some rough edges, and like
Yeah.
and she utilizes them throughout her career, and then everyone knows that she's gone through a lot throughout her
Hmm.
career as well. While we were enjoying a lot of these movies that were coming out, during this period, she was going through a lot of stuff then,
Yeah.
and but still able to, when it came to the work, it seemed like she could just focus on that and like just
Hmm.
constantly put in good performances, just always solid. And I've always like brought her up as someone who I respect for. Snarky line deliveries are some of my favorites, and she I think is the queen of some of this stuff. And this film is a brilliant showcase for her talents because she really and I can't and I guess what they said they were like I guess Columbia or TriStar Home Entertainment when they right we'll make the movie, but they said that you either have to get they were like you have to get Natalie Portman, Kate Winslet, or Rose McGowan. Not I don't think necessarily for that role, but they were like you need to get one of those three girls to get to be in it, and they got Rose McGowan, and she knew that role like through and through, I guess, and you could tell that she is having a blast playing it, and I think they're all having fun, but like she's definitely having a blast taking on a role like that. So I thought that was pretty cool to see again after all these years. So what were your thoughts when the movie opened and you have like kind of the voiceover, but then the initial like kidnapping and I mean I guess you've heard about the plot of the movie before you watched it, but what was it like to actually see how this transpires and how things get started when you first saw it?
Well, because it makes I don't know. For me, it always made me think about what would I do in that situation because it's like they were actually doing something like innocently fun and just a prank that it was a prank that went wrong. And it shocked me that they actually show, the Jawbreaker stuck in her throat. And you're just like,
in her throat.
Holy crap. Like, I'm like, dang. But at the same time, like, crap, what would I do? Like, you would have to call the police. But then again, you're like, when Courtney Shane's trying to, like, reason with them, they're like, we're going to go to jail, this, they're not going to believe us kind of thing. Like, you start to think, like, crap, would I hide that too? Or would I, like, put my good morals to use and actually confess and all that stuff. But yeah, so I think what shocked me most was they showed the Jawbreaker, and then I think that's one of my worst fears too, because I mean if you ever had a Jawbreaker in real life, I know I've like not choked on it, but like, oh, I probably shouldn't put the whole thing in my mouth, or we tell kids like don't put that whole thing in your mouth, because then I'm just like that could happen.
Yeah, that's very true. I remember like being like, because I didn't see this in theaters. We were seeing a lot of those movies back then in theaters. Even though I was, if I did go to theaters, this is one of those periods where we would have had to ask someone older to buy our ticket. It was rated R. But it came and went so fast that I didn't have a chance to see it in theaters. But I did see it when it came out on home video, and I knew the concept because I had seen the trailer and stuff. But it's different once you see it in the movie, and like you said, when they do pop up in that trunk and you do see the Jawbreaker like stuck in the middle of her throat, it is pretty jarring. And and then also like it's so funny when I talk about this movie with other people, recommend it to them, they're always like, it's just a weird thing, why would they use that to gag her with? And the director has his reasons for using it. He actually has a quote where he says, like, the Jawbreaker just came to represent the duality of the poppy sweetness of the girls of high school and of youth versus the whole idea that this thing could break your jaw, which I mean, great, because he has like a deeper meaning behind why he used it.
Yeah.
And then, you take it and you like, talk to other people about it. They're like, why? Well, it's just like a weird thing to do or a concept, like build a movie around. But I think you just have to run with what they're doing and just accept like this is the narrative they're running with, and just know that like this is not like a serious teen film at all. It is very much almost satirical in the way it approaches high school and then high school politics, and just the way that all of it kind of transpires. So like I think you just have to know that, and then you can fully accept what the movie's putting down. So that's why when everyone asks about like that's just a weird concept, I was like, nah, I get it. Just run with it. It's fine. It's completely fine.
I wonder what the sales were in Jawbreakers around then. Like did they go up?
They went up. When they go up.
Now that I think about it, I'm like, I'll have to research that one. Right? Exactly.
I'd be too scared. Do you want to? I mean, like, granted, no one's like jamming it down my throat, but like, yeah, but like that, yeah, it'd be funny if they're just the curiosity of it like went up even a little bit as the movie became more popular, like on home video and everything. That's pretty funny though. It's just and I also think the cool thing about the way the movie looks and the way it's styled, because I mean for a movie that's $3.5 million, I think it still looks pretty good for a movie that
Hmm.
is that cheap, and kind of just the colors and all that, like they're on the Jawbreaker. That kind of it seems like it's just also represented in the fashion for the girls, the way the film looks. It's a very
Hmm.
colorful, despite being so dark, it's a very colorful, like he said, poppy kind of movie, and I think that's why it's probably continued to influence style a bit for a lot of people who discover it. And it was interesting because I was watching, trying to figure out how much of it, that the way everyone looked, how 90s it looked, if it looked like something from 1999. And there are certain things that were, but like
Hmm.
there's other things that, because it seems like a lot of these things are coming back now, that
Yeah.
it's hard to tell, I guess.
Hmm.
But did you notice anything like that when it came to how the movie looks and all that?
I noticed it was very bright, like the bright like colors, like the pinks, the greens, the blues. I think that was intentional though too, because I think it kind of went with the Jawbreaker thing. Because like, yeah, the Jawbreaker itself was white, but once you get down to the nitty gritty of it, that's when all the colors pop up. So
Right.
I kind of drew comparison to that as well. But and then I noticed like each character kind of had their own different colors too. Like Courtney, who was the leader, she was more in the reds and the purples.
Yeah.
Um, uh, what's her name? Marcy was more the darker colors, like the yellows, the oranges. Then you have Violet, who's in the pinks, and then
Yeah.
Julie, who's more the blues and the more casual. And then obviously when she gets out of the friend group, her
Whole
outfits
look
change
changes. Yeah.
a little more mute. So I think they use those colors too to stand out and to show that who was the popular clique and stuff like that. I also kind of got the 50s vibes too from some of their outfits, like especially
Yeah.
Courtney when she was wearing certain stuff, like the scarves and everything was very like 50s housewife type thing. But then I feel like that was also just kind of a homage, like that's who she wanted to be. Like she wanted to portray this like innocent girl, but yet she still had that snarky tone where she could still rule and
Yeah.
all that. So I love the colors, and I think that's one of the great things about this movie is the coloring, the production, and
Yeah.
like just the costumes and stuff, makeup. Because I mean, even like when Fern was not popular, she was always in like dark brown or like
Like
black, just
drab
like
color. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. But then when she gets into the popular group, it's popped pink, it's bright pink, like Barbie color and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it did remind me. Now that I rewatched it, it did remind me a lot of the Barbie too. Like if you go back
Yeah.
to the recent Barbie movie, all those colors were very pop, and and
Yeah.
their kind of outfits were very 50s but 90s kind of thing too. So I think could have been an homage to stuff like that, like housewife type things, but at the same time, showing where they were in the food chain, I guess you would call it. So
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it was done intentionally, and I applaud the director for that and the production for that, because it makes that movie different.
Yeah. I agree. What do you think of? And I think it's been compared to it more favorably today, but I guess when it came out, um, a lot of critics did point out its similarities to Heather's, which came out in 1988. But some critics even accuse it of just blatantly ripping off Heather's, because they kind of have like the same almost trajectory a little bit when it comes to
Yeah.
how their I guess their stories progress. But do you think it's more of an homage and not just like him blatantly trying to rip off what Heather's did?
I mean, I don't think he was totally trying to rip it off. I think definitely there was a lot of homages to it. Um, and I mean, we always talk about Hollywood. There's no more original ideas, and it's always some kind of copy of something or very similar to another story or another movie we've seen. So I think it's hard not to, you know,
Yeah,
take examples of stories but I feel like he was like, I want to be like that movie. Like Heather's was so great. I want to be something like that. And it's funny because I remember reading when we were talking about this movie was that the director actually pitched this movie as like a horror film. He actually wanted to do it, but
no,
then
it
it's
is.
just
Yeah,
as he continued writing it and it came together, it was more, he realized, more of a dark comedy. So I definitely think he just kind of went down that road, and he's like, well, look what Heather's did with theirs, and he kind of
yeah,
just used that as a navigation. um But I mean, because we could say the same thing, like Mean Girls ripped off Jawbreaker. You know, they did the slow mo walk, they did the pastel pinks and stuff like that. So I don't think
Yeah,
it's necessarily ripping off. I think it's more of a homage to stuff, and I think and I think it's a good thing because it's like those movies were so important to the previous one that they want to honor it in a certain way. So and then
yeah,
obviously make it different for the audience.
yeah. I get the vibe that it's more of an homage. I mean, I read some of what critics wrote back then, and one critic even accused it of like of them of almost like plagiarism rather than like
Mm,
it being like an homage. It especially when you get something like Mean Girls, right? Because I don't think when Mean Girls came out that they said that it felt like a ripoff of Heather's. I mean, they did compare it, the two of them, and I think one of the main comparisons about Mean Girls, like we said earlier, was that Heather's felt like a more, it didn't have to go down the sweet like in a saccharine route at the end
mhm,
where it's like here's the moral of the story, and Mean Girls does that, and I don't think that's a detriment to Mean Girls. It's just the movie that it is. I
mhm,
think that it has enough like snarkiness and kind of wit to it that when you get to the end and it's kind of like the moral of the story is there, you accept it for that's what they were trying to do. But no one I think ever really with Mean Girls where they were saying they wouldn't say like it was ripping off Heather's, and like that's why I think it's strange that they kind of attacked Jawbreaker there. Now, granted, like you said, no one dies in Mean Girls. No one from the main clique dies at
yeah,
all. So I think maybe Jawbreaker as being so dark probably has more is more in line with what Heather's was doing, but
mhm,
I really don't think that he was trying to steal anything basically or rip it off. And it felt like like he's even said that he hadn't seen a T movie like he saw with Heather's, like for him at the time, like for
mhm,
whatever. So that's what he kind of wanted to make, one for the '90s. And I think I can't think of any other one around that time that is like Heather's other than Jawbreaker in terms of like its dark sense of humor. Until you get Mean Girls, really. Like
yeah,
I don't think any other like '90s teen comedies had that. I mean, something like, and it's not really a teen comedy, I guess, but it tried like something like Drop Dead Gorgeous was really darkly funny too, and that came
yeah,
out in '99. Another movie that didn't do all that well when it came out, but found life way later.
mhm,
That's like the closest thing I can come up with where as far as like the dark humor is, but like
yeah,
everything else around that time played it either really sugary sweet or they went like full raunch R-rated comedy, which is
right,
something you get like with American you get with American Pie like
mhm,
that summer. So yeah, I think it's unfair. I mean, it seems like he was inspired by it, which uh, that should be more of a flattering thing. And
mhm,
it seems like no one involved with Heather's has ever accused Jawbreaker or Mean Girls for ripping them off. So I think it's
yeah.
interesting that critics went down that route uh, with
Well, I mean,
Jawbreaker. But I also
if
oh
you
yeah,
look
go
at
ahead.
horror too, I mean, horror does the same thing. Like you got Friday 13th, Halloween, like they're very similar in guy in a mask stalking,
Yeah,
teenagers. So I mean, it's very similar, and I don't think it's anybody ripping them off. I think it's they're paying respect to their previous things that influenced them, or you know, reminded them of their childhood, and they're like, I want to be like that. I want to write a story like that. So I think
yeah,
you know, Darren was fine with what he did, and like I agree with you. Total homage to everything, and
yeah. I accept that. Now we always talk about this when we bring up movies that came out during this period and then today. Is there anything you think, even though this is clearly established as a dark comedy, there's going to be some very not politically correct jokes, like whatever,
yeah,
throughout the movie? Is there anything that you think kind of flew then that would maybe not fly now if it came out today?
I don't know. I don't know. I feel like the whole concept of popularity and stuff like that. Like I think females are very more like I don't know how to say it. Like they're very like powerful now. Like the
Yeah,
like Barbie just came out and it's like woman power and stuff like that. So I think this movie kind of harks back to the olden days where girls were just like props and they had to have the boyfriend and they had to win prom queen and very like superficial type thing, whereas they couldn't think for themselves. They had to like follow the group. And I mean,
yeah,
I think that kind of aspect, I think you're kind of throwing females back a few decades when you look at it that way. Um, and then I think, I think just the whole we murdered our friend and we're not going to tell anybody about it kind of thing. Um, I don't know. I mean, I feel like just probably that. I mean, because I think we've seen stuff like similar to stuff like that, especially in high school, like with horror movies and stuff, and people are okay with it. It's just, I think maybe the dialogue and stuff like that. But
Yeah, I there was I think the which I mean is just a part of the movie. I think the one thing that I noticed is Courtney's idea to kind of frame Liz's murder or whatever her
um,
dying as like a rape
yeah,
rather
that's
than
yeah,
so I that was the one thing I was like I don't know if that would fly today and like and
that is a
they
very
kind of
touchy subject.
and,
Yeah,
and they run with it like in the movie like it really like she even goes to the extent of like framing someone else by having sex in Liz's bed and getting it done that way, which I guess that's how we get the Marilyn Manson cameo, right?
and I totally forgot about that until I saw his name in the credits. I was like, when was Marilyn Manson in that? And then I went back and looked. It was like, oh, he's the stranger. But
yeah,
then I realized they were engaged at the time, so she was able to get him on there, and I was like, okay.
yeah, they were definitely together, and I was like, all right. So that was one thing that was like, not that I think the movie's wrong for it to be. It's in the movie. The story is the story, right?
Yeah.
But I think it might be frowned a bit upon if it came out today. And I guess you're right.
I don't think Rose would even go for it anyway because she had to deal with the whole Harvey Weinstein stuff and everything. So she would have no, this is not happening. We're not doing that thing. So
yeah, that's actually interesting too. That probably would be
So
much different based on her own
exactly.
personal experience.
Mhm.
I also think that, like you said, thankfully, like women are and more so now viewed in a more powerful stance, and there's a lot more unity. And I think
Mhm.
movies like this, even though they're fun, some parts of the movie create this kind of like division between girls where they're like kind
Yeah.
of going up against each other,
Mhm.
and that's fun. But I think it doesn't sell as well maybe today as it did back then.
Yeah.
And I that was one aspect of the movie that, even though I found it funny and hilarious, but
Yeah.
it's it's still something that's kind of changed, and you kind of see a lot of that like starkiness with a lot of the girls across a lot of these teen movies that came out during this period. It's a much different
Oh
time
yeah.
between 97 and or 96 to like the early 2000s, that a lot of jokes could fly that you're just like, wow, I mean, if they got to write that and say it and no one flagged it, right? All right, cool. And you kind of just look at it in the context of like, all right, that is pretty much what it was like when that movie came out, and things are definitely different now as far as what we are okay with and what we're allowed to kind of say in
Mhm.
film and TV and all that.
And that's why
But I
film's
also
so
like
great.
yeah too. But at the same time, when I watch something like this, I respect it for like going like, I think one of the things I really liked about it on this watch was that it goes all in on what it's trying to do and has no shame about it. Like it really
Yeah.
has like zero shame. And like every joke might not work and everything that it's trying to do may not totally work, but it is so willing to do it that you almost like, I respect for doing it.
Yeah.
It's especially because like you said, at that time there wasn't a lot of movies like this coming out of this nature, and it really um kind of took a lot of big swings
Yeah.
and hope that the audience would get it. And I think what you saw back then is that maybe the few people that saw in theaters back then got it, and then more people got it when they saw it on video. The
Mhm.
division for critics then, and is interesting. I guess a lot of older audiences were like probably like it wasn't for them. I
Mhm.
know there's one review from Roger Ebert, and because he gave the film 1.5 out of 4 stars, and he
Oh,
said the
Roger
movie
Ebert.
is, I know. That's how I feel about him when it comes to horror. I even though I respect him as a critic, but he said the movie is a slick production of a lame script. If anyone in the plot had the slightest intelligence, the story would implode. Was one of his quotes from his review. And then Box Office Magazine gave the film 1.5 out of 5 stars and criticized the film's humor and again all of its similarities to Heather's. Yeah, you think it's just like it just wasn't like critics wise, movie reviewer wise, the
Mhm.
right group of people just weren't seeing it professionally
Yeah.
back then, and which is completely why like it has a bigger legacy now. Uh, with other reviewers who have like reevaluated it, who
Mhm.
either probably watched it when they were growing up, or are in the age range where it's this kind of movie is in their wheelhouse and they understand what it's trying to do, and it clearly made more for them than critics who viewed the film originally back in 1999.
Yeah. And Siskel and Ebert were like the top critics too, so I feel like a lot of people listen to them compared to
Yep.
nowadays where we have a lot more variety of critics and
A lot more
social
voices.
media. Exactly. So I think back then, if Siskel and Ebert said it wasn't good, well, I'm not going to check it out because they said it was good. It wasn't good, but yeah.
How do you feel about most of the? Because we get like a lot of really fun kind of cameo roles from a lot of like older stars who like of course were big with a lot of these directors. Then like Darren, I guess knew like PJ Souls, we all know her from Carrie and Halloween. Pam Grier is in it as Detective Vera Cruz. We all know her from back in the day from the blaxploitation films like Foxy Brown. But then she of course had a career resurgence doing Jackie Brown with Quentin Tarantino. We mentioned Marilyn Manson has a cameo. Carol Kane is Principal Sherwood. She was on, of course, on Taxi and then in a When a Stranger Calls back in the day. And then you get Jeff Conaway as Mr. Fox and he was in Grease. So there's a lot of these fun kind of cameos in here. And I was wondering what you kind of thought about how
Which is funny too, because it's like they were all in kind of like other teenage movies too. I mean, you had the Carrie, you had the Grease. So it was just kind of like bringing those respectful artists from back then into something more modern at that time, which is always cool. And I love when directors do that too, because it's like it shows that they respect the actor for what they did in their time, but still giving them that opportunity to pass the torch on to the next generation of high school stars and all that stuff too.
Yeah.
So
I also forgot that Tatiana Lee was in it from the first.
I noticed that too. I was like, oh, it's Ashley.
Brenda. She plays
and
Brenda.
Then,
but yeah, I was like, what?
Yeah, and then did we mention her? I forget her name. The girl from that '70s show. She was in it too.
Oh, right.
The sister.
No, yeah. I might blank here on it, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. So there's a lot of fun, like blink it. And some of them are blink if you miss it kind of cameos, and then other ones are a little bit more established. But yeah, I thought it was cool to kind of have them littered throughout this movie, and a lot of directors like this who once they kind of make their plea that like they love their stuff kind of growing up, and it would mean a lot to them to get them into the movie. You kind of see that a lot with films like this, and I'm glad that they all were willing to do it, and they understood probably what the movie was and what the assignment was, and it'd be cool for like a certain generation to see them pop up in this movie, and they probably been more excited today when you watch it to see some of these faces pop up in the movie as well.
I mean, Carol Kane's a legend, and I always forget she's in there. I was like, oh, I love Carol Kane, she's great, and so yeah, it's good to see those kind of actors in these little films and stuff.
And and she has some really funny moments in the movie too. I like when she's talking to a detective and they're trying to figure out like who she asked to like bring Liz her homework, and she's like, and she's basically like, oh yeah, Courtney did. She's like, okay. She's like, oh yeah, like Courtney changed. She's like, yeah, but oh no, because then she eventually like told and then the way that Pam Grier looks at her, kind of like what, like stupid. Yeah, it's great. It's so really like funny. And it's so instantly like meek too the way she talks.
Right?
Well. Like yeah. Yeah, I love her.
It was funny because I remember reading about the story when they're carrying Liz's body upstairs. They drop her in the movie, and it actually really did drop her. And so they kept it in the movie, which I thought was hecka funny because I was like, oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. But it's like little things like that. When I read about these films and stuff, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Like, the director keep that in, and this wasn't supposed to be in the film, and they added it in there, and so I don't know.
Yeah, I guess Charlotte is her name. Charlotte Iena. I don't know if I get it right. She's actually retired from acting. She doesn't really do it anymore, and she won Miss Teen USA back in 1993, which has a really, fun, thankless role of like she's like one of the original members of the clique, but she has no lines because of course she dies, right off the bat. but she is kind of seen. She's seen in photos. She's seen in like kind of interesting little like flashbacks, like when Fern is describing what it was like to kind of sit behind her and how she admired her and like all that kind of stuff. But yeah, no lines. Yeah, and she had kudos to her.
Makes an impact.
Yeah, it makes. I wonder what it was like for her, like being like carried around by the three girls and yeah, with nothing to say or do. But like it's funny because like in her own way, she has her own like kind of impactful role in the film, even though she has 0 lines. I mean, like that even like the look of her with that in her throat, it's iconic now at this point. So it's like it shows that there are no small parts, I guess.
Right.
Like so good for her because she's. I love that they dropped her and they kept it in. I hope that she was like kind of like cool, like whatever it happened.
Yeah, it said she was cool with it. She was like, "Oh, it's all right." What did you think about the ending? And spoiler alert, obviously we're gonna probably ruin the ending, but did you think it was satisfactory? Do you think we needed more? Do you think
so? How I kind of felt about it. So the movie, for everyone that has seen it, it's really short. It's 87 minutes, so it's a breeze if you ever do decide to watch it. I think that since the movie goes there and goes so dark at certain points, I think I expected a bigger comeuppance for Courtney.
Yeah.
Like she doesn't seem like the way it was framed in the film, I guess. It doesn't seem like the kind of girl that would be just merely embarrassed by being embarrassed by the whole school. Now I know that it's revealing that she killed Liz, but the way that it's kind of presented and done, it's what are they throwing like their corsages at her as she's like walking walking down the path. I don't know. I think a darker ending, but a funny one would have been a little better. I think I wanted to see more happen to her because it does kind of after it comes out and she takes that final like Polaroid of her after Julie does, then it's just over.
Yeah, and that's I always say that too because I'm like, I want to know what happens after. Does she get booked? Does Fox or the detective come in and arrest her? Does she like prison for life? Is she community service? Like I would have loved to see like snapshots of that, even if it wasn't like the whole like film, just like snapshots of like a brief like narration of what happened, eventually to all of them. Because I mean, they were seniors in high school, so it's like, what happens after high school? Like, did Julie stay with Zach? What happened to Fern? All that
exactly.
Stuff. Like, I always wonder stuff like that, and that's just me overthinking the film. But at the same time, it's like I want to know what happened.
Yeah, that makes sense though, because like I do feel like it's kind of abrupt. Like it just kind of ends after that. Really, like the whole movie has its fun like build up, and you do want to see what you want to know what happens to all the characters. But I would have loved a more like firm like come up from Courtney. But I mean, for the sake of the movie, I don't think it ruins the movie by any means.
No,
like,
it doesn't ruin the movie.
And then like
she gets what she deserves,
Yeah, and Rose McGowan is pretty funny in that moment where like she sees Julie and she's just like Julie, and then she's like smiling and she's like, It's really funny.
And then just that pose, they actually have a picture of her not looking her best, and it's in the yearbook and all that stuff,
And honestly, like some of the funnier things from the movie actually happened for me during that last few minutes. Is like the whole like just slow mo of them talking that like where they're like you bitch, and then like they have that one shot of Rebecca Gayheart where she just waves at her and says eat shit, like it's just in slow motion, like that stuff was pretty funny. And then just like how dramatic it is when they're throwing like the corsages and stuff at her. I think
Marcy just hides under the table.
Yeah. I think Tatiana Lee's character Brenda is just like dramatically going, just like Courtney, why? It's just so like
you were my hero.
Yeah, you're my hero. Yeah. It's just so over the top dramatic, but I think it really did work. It's funny, but I think I wanted a harder ending though.
Yeah,
like, if I had to change anything, it'd be that. Do you have any scenes that are your favorites or stand out to you as some of your favorites?
I love the slow-mo walk when Fern's finally, Violet.
Oh, in the group.
I think that's just iconic. I love when Actually, I like there's a scene I really liked was when Julie calls Fern, and she kind of and Fern like kind of stops her Violet act and like is back to Fern,
Oh
and they're
yeah,
talking on the phone, and it's just like, do you remember when we used to have sleepovers? Do you remember this? And you know how much has changed and stuff, and it showed how they were both longing for something,
yeah,
like they knew like this click wasn't real, like wasn't fulfilling, but their friendship was like real back then, and how people change in life. I mean, I remember like personally, like kids I was friends with in middle school, like I wasn't really friends with them in high school after, because everyone kind of goes their different ways. So I thought that
yeah,
was a very honest look at that, and just kind of remembering back to those old times when they were innocent and they weren't worried about who likes who or stuff like that. So it was such a like simple but yet quiet scene, but I think it still made a really big impact. And then,
yeah.
Courtney calls and kind of ruins the whole thing, and you're just like, Courtney ruins everything, like no matter what.
No matter what, no matter what. Um, that's actually interesting because the movie doesn't take a lot of time to stop and have like a serious moment. But that one
Mhm.
does work for me. I think it was like really well written and well acted by the two of them. And I guess Julie has a couple of those with Zach, the guy in the drama character too. Like when they're a bit
Mhm.
more not as played for laughs, and
Yeah.
sometimes those scenes don't really fit. They feel really out of place. But I actually did like the one with Fern, because it actually, I think you needed that kind of
Mhm.
to kind of show really show who Fern used to be, and
Mhm.
also what she's turning into, and then also establish how someone like Julie could be in that, but then also get out of it. Like she's
Mhm.
not quite as Marcy clearly was more of a follower, and you can
Yeah.
kind of tell that in the way that she uh handles herself with Courtney. Like it's not she understands her place in the group. Like if I was trying to compare it to Mean Girls, I was trying to figure out who would Marcy be amongst the girls in that movie,
She'd be
and
Gretchen
she
Wieners.
she'd be Gretchen. Yeah, like she like more of a loyal follower than
Not not
not a leader by any
leader by
means.
any means.
So I did want to I'm trying to think of what other funny moments I have for myself in this, because like it's uh I don't know, there's a lot of really kind of fun lines and dialogue in the movie as well. And I don't know, it still plays really strong. I think he Darren Stein deserves a lot more credit for his screenplay than he probably gets, because I think it's really really funny. And again, it might be what we call an homage to other films like Heather's or stuff that came before it, but it tapped into a really certain time in high school life in 1999, where like I was like watching that and getting some of the jokes where it's like, yeah, that was definitely kind of like the things, either what's going on in high school, or at least things that were being made fun of in high school. And I kind of I understood that really while watching it. So I thought, I don't know, kudos to him, because I think it's cool as a filmmaker for him to see over the years how the movie has grown with audiences, and people have come to accept it and love it, and probably put it into the kind of pantheon of other high school movies, and where it deserves to be. It also should be a proud member of the class 99. 1999 was a great year for movies, as most of us know. And I think it deserves its spot completely where it's at, even if it is just a minor, like smaller cult classic.
Yep, I agree with that. Definitely.
Yeah. It what do you think as far as it's how do you feel about its legacy like today? And do you think that like do you think it's because of people our age who are like, oh well, like this is why the film is good and we've kind of carried that torch? Or do you think like a younger generation of people have found it too and kind of made it their movie as well?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's movies that, we obviously grew up with. So it's like, oh, I remember that movie. And it kind of, reminisces of our childhood back then. But then again, it's like some of us are showing our own kids like movies we grew up with, and then they're telling
Yeah.
their friends, or like it it becomes a meme, and then it gets popular on TikTok, and then everyone's like, "Oh, I wonder what that film is," and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know about this one. Let's check it out," kind of thing, and it just kind of progresses from there. And I think that's one of the positive things about social media is that it can get the ball rolling on stuff that may not have had an audience, or make something popular again, kind of thing. Like, I mean, we see that all the time recently in pop culture, like songs that, didn't play well when they're in the 80s, but they were used in a popular show and now they blow up, or, an
Yeah.
actor that we didn't realize was in a campy little horror movie. And then we're like, oh, let's go check that out. And, oh, this movie is so campy, but it's so fun. So I think that's definitely one of the positives about social media, getting to share it with the world and stuff and helping people discover things.
Yeah, I agree. And I would agree with that too. I think a lot of, not just us, I think a lot of younger people are finding it and celebrating it in its own right. And I know, like I said, it was nice to see yesterday. There was a lot of stuff that was popping up on social media where I was pleasantly surprised by how many people were shouting it out on its 25th anniversary. And and what's cool is that even that kind of like celebrating those milestones pushes the movie out even more for people to discover it. And for other people who haven't seen it, once they see that, they're like, "Oh, what's the fuss all about? Why is everyone talking about the movie today?" And it'll be interesting to see. Like, what I've never done, which I would want to try to do. I would love to watch Heather's Jawbreaker and Mean Girls all back to back and kind of see how they flow together, and
Mhm.
how, because I've never actually done that where, I mean, I could think about what happens in Heather's, like, oh yeah, that's similar to what happens in Jawbreaker. Same thing with Mean Girls, but it'd be interesting to kind of have that trifecta uh kind of movie watch back to back to see how actually similar they all are to each other. Because I
Yeah.
personally have never done it, but it'd probably be a fun three-way watch though, for sure.
And if you ever wanted to go really bizarre, you could add the craft in there too.
Oh
Go a
yeah,
little
that
horror.
even that even has its own kind of snarky, like it has the same almost, I would say it feels weird. I guess mean spirited vibe to it, but like not in a way where it's like off putting. That's just like it's just the vibe and who the characters are in it. But
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. You throw in the craft, that has a little bit of the Heatherish vibes too, even
Yeah.
especially in the look of it. So
It's like the
yeah, I
complete
mean,
opposite of colorful.
yeah, and
Total
just because
dark.
it's more of a horror movie, but like,
Mhm.
yeah, I think it really fits in there. And in terms of its legacy, they also said that McGowan's Courtney Shane has become something of a pop culture icon on social media, with TribecaFilm.com declaring of McGowan's performance that every single line reading was a thing of Betty Davis' aspiring beauty, and with any justice, it's a performance that will only grow in esteem over time. I think that it has, and people still kind of honor it and respect it. Um, I was happy to see that. I think for one of its last kind of milestone anniversaries, McGowan talks very highly of the movie and is proud of it. So that was great to see, like we said, because a lot of stuff around this time for her, a lot of stuff she was doing probably wasn't the greatest for her, but I'm glad that she looks back on this movie and is proud of it, because she really is. This might be, and I love her in Scream, and I love her in Grindhouse, the Planet Terror stuff, but this might be my favorite Rose McGowan
Mm.
performance overall.
Yeah.
I think she just eats up the scenery in the best way possible without being too over the top. Like
Yeah.
she finds the line and goes with it. And yeah, I think it is definitely my best. Yeah, if I had to pick one, it would probably be this. I don't know where you stand on that, but
I know. I agree with that. I think here she was able to kind of let loose a little more in this one.
yeah,
Um, and she's the star. I
yeah,
mean, in Scream, she was, the supporting character, which was great. And same with like Planet Terror and Grindhouse, or, she was the supporting character, I felt like. But here she really gets to shine, and it's her
yeah,
movie. Like, when you think of Jawbreaker, you think of Courtney Shane. So I think she owns it. And I couldn't see anybody else doing that kind of part, like how well she did it. So
yeah.
I totally agree with
And
you.
and they wanted her. I mean, it was Natalie Portman, Kate Winslet, or Rose McGowan. We don't know if necessarily for that role in particular, but they wanted one of those three girls in the movie, and
Yeah.
Rose McGowan was a name that they threw out there, and she completely owns it. And in addition to her, we talked about the costumes. They said the costumes continue to be celebrated, drawing praise from the likes of Vogue and Rookie magazines. The scene where they actually strut down the hallway, as you said, to slow motion to Imperial Teens. I actually had never heard that song until Jawbreaker.
Oh, really?
And, yeah, and now that like I've heard it a lot in the last 2 days because I'm just going through everyone's like social media stuff. Like they've used that. Even I use it on our post for the Jawbreaker stuff. But they said it's become a signature feature of the film, drawing homage in film and television, most notably, like you said, in Mean Girls, and it's also parodied in films like Not Another Teen Movie. Another person who's commented on the movie fairly recently, back in 2014, Julie Greer said, "I really didn't think it was anything special while we were shooting it, but when I saw the final product, I knew it was really good and was so proud of it. I thought it looked beautiful. It had just the right amount of sexy pop culture fun to it. I do think it's quite special." And I would have to agree with her too, and she's also very good in it. Actually, everyone that has a major role is very good. I know we get a lot of the props to Rose McGowan because she is the lead, and she does dominate most of the movie. But they all kind of worked well together. I think it's interesting that Rachel A. Cook was apparently supposed to. She read for the part of Julie, and she did read with Rose McGowan and Julie Benz, and they said like the chemistry just wasn't quite right. And I guess Darren Stein said that it could have been because she was kind of younger than them, a little bit younger than them, and that he wanted girls who were a little bit older, even though they're in their 20s at the time.
Yeah.
Like he wanted the whole thing to feel like a heightened thing, and like even making the girls feel a bit older, even though they were in high school. That's what he wanted. I'm trying to imagine Rachel Leigh Cook as Julie, and I just can't. Not in a bad way, because I think she's good in her own right and other stuff.
Yeah.
But I think they found the right girls to really
just think
she
wouldn't have been in She's All That then if she would have been in that one. So
true. That's true. Unless they were shooting at really different times, like they're probably, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And one was a bigger
could have
hit,
been.
of course.
It's those what if moments, but
yeah, of course, right.
I'm pleased with the outcome we had. So
I am pleased with the outcome as well, and I'm glad is there anything else that you want to throw in that's as far as actually what we do usually at the end of this, we give the film a score for us. You can do however score you want. You can do on a scale of 1 to 10. You can do letter grade. If you want to do like the letterbox up to 5 stars, what would you give Jawbreaker?
Out of 5 stars, I would say 4.5, just because, like I said, I would have liked a little more on the ending, but it doesn't diminish the film as a whole. And I think it's a great pop culture moment that will live on in history. And I feel like we'll still be talking about this film another 25 years from now of how the impact it had on the Hollywood, landscape. So,
yeah.
But I would give 4.5.
I would give it 4, but I think it's still good. The only reason, and the way I know some people are going to be like, "Oh, that's kind of high for a movie like this," but it really did. Even though it maybe didn't feel like it did when it came out, it did kind of define what these movies could be back then. Mm-hmm. And then a movie like every movie doesn't become a cult classic once it dies theatrically. That could just be the end of the story, and that's all she wrote, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a reason why it ended up being picked up and kind of reevaluated later, and more people have discovered it. And I think that, like I said, I think the script is really smart and funny. I think all the actors do a really good job kind of just running with what they were given and just completely understanding the excitement. I think that's really important in a movie like this, to really get the humor and get what the director's like trying to sell. And in that regard, as far as it being like a pop culture moment, I think it deserves a lot more credit. I mean, it's getting the credit it deserves, but I think it'll probably receive even more as years go on. I think the older it gets, the more people see it, the more that it'll be appreciated too. So I totally believe that and agree with that. And I loved everything about it. I will not let this much time go by between another rewatch of it, because it was a really long time since I had seen it, and was completely floored by how much I remembered of it too. That was another thing. Like while I was watching it, like it was all coming back like Total Recall a bit. Like I was like thinking the lines before they were saying them, and I hadn't watched the movie in a really really long time, but it was really really kind of cool to kind of bring that all back. One thing I wanted to ask you about too, I did not know this, that they there's been talks about, like, I guess, like, for years, like, doing a musical adaptation of it. That began in like 2010. They said a Los Angeles concert presentation occurred starring Shoshana Bean, Leslie Margarita, and Janelle Lee Green. Original film writer director Darren Stein returned to write the book, while Jeff Thompson and Jordan Mann wrote original music and lyrics. They also said 2011 that Manhattan reading occurred with Diana DeGarmo in the role of Fern Mayo, and as well. There was one that JoJo the singer was a part of as well in Manhattan back in 2013. And I hear that they want to try to do the movie musical treatment with it. I mean, probably seeing what the Mean Girls movie musical adaptation did. Do you think that would work? And do you think it would be successful, even though this movie wasn't theatrically that successful when it came out, but it's grown in popularity since then?
I really think it would depend on who they cast, because obviously you have to get a good cast. And the
Right.
director too. Because I know on like Broadway they had Heather's the musical, and Mean Girls had the musical treatment too. But
Yeah.
to do it as like a film musical adaptation, I think it would just depend on who they cast and the director. I think it could be done. I really do, and
Yeah.
I think people who I think it's been long enough to where people would be interested in it again. Obviously, they would have to change some things because, like we said, sometimes some of these jokes don't fly anymore, and so. But I mean, they did that in the recent Mean Girls musical. They had to change some things up because obviously 2004 was 25 years ago, so, or 20 years ago. So you can't do all those jokes again. So they had to update it for audiences now, and I think they could do it. I don't think it's out. Would it be a streaming movie? Would it be theatrical? Again,
That's another,
I think it's how big their budget is. I think director is very important. So, but I could definitely see it be done. Like, if given in the right hands, it could be done very well. So I'd be excited to see it, and I think people would be excited to see it.
Yeah, I definitely watch it. I think it probably would be more streaming than theatrical, but I would totally be down to see what they do with it. Or you probably get some of the original cast playing, like, teachers or principals or something. that probably definitely happen. But yeah, I think there is a road for that to occur, and if they really want to do it, I think the interest is there, at least for a streaming release of it, even if it's not theatrical. I mean, Mean Girls, that movie musical was going to be straight to Paramount Plus, and then they had test screenings and they were apparently through the roof, so that's why they pivoted from that and made money. So I guess anything is possible at this point. So I guess we shall see.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. All right, Mario, thank you for joining me on this latest deep dive episode. Just again, for people that want to follow your movie page, let them know where they can find it again. And of course, we'll put it at the bottom of the descriptions of this episode so they can also find you and add you.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. People can find me on Instagram at Movies with Mr. Mario, where I do movie and TV reviews and share the latest. But it was a pleasure talking about this movie. Thank you for allowing me on here. I really had a good time with you talking about this pop culture phenomenon.
Well, thank you for joining me. And as always, you can find Back to the Blockbuster and Back to the Blockbuster Presents Deep Dives wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Spotify, but we have to shout out the Playlist Studio app because they are our podcast network. They have been very good to us ever since they started with us over 2 years ago. So please, you can get that from the iOS store, or if you have a Droid, you can also get it from the Google Play Store. In addition to the main news show that it will be coming back with new episodes next week, as well as some anniversary episodes coming up down the pipeline. We have Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure that we'll be recording next week as well. And then we have a pretty packed anniversary March that we're still trying to figure out how we're going to do, because the 1999 movies and 2009, 89, it gets crazy starting in March, and we can't do them all, but we will do our very best to do as many as we can. And who knows, if we can't do them on the main show, maybe there'll be deep dives, and maybe people like Mario will come join us again. Next time he actually has to pick the movie that he wants to do. I don't want to force the movie on him this time, like I did this time. But yes, definitely the next time you pick what we're going to deep dive.
All right,
that one as well. But yeah, until next time, guys, thank you for joining us and thank you for listening. Peace out.